Hi, in today's lecture, what we are going to cover is four main topics. So, how do these topics relate to the overall syllabus learning objectives? So, the syllabus learning objective that we are going to expand upon today is a lab program showing the ability to create a program in R, Python, or Java to display the student name and also perform some simple arithmetic. So these break down into four different objectives, as we mentioned earlier. One is to create an R program. So in today's lab session, we're actually going to run through the creation of the program. Then we're going to identify the tools, features, and how to input, process, and output information on the R program. We are going to also create a new procedure to do some simple operations, some additions, some multiplication. And lastly, we're going to actually create a format to print out the student names and to enter their information. So four different topics that we're going to cover in today's session. So firstly, we want to get started with the R program. So what I'd like you guys to do is to go to Anaconda, and in Anaconda you should see an R Studio option. Click on Launch. If this is not available, you need to go to Channels and click on Install to install the R Studio. If you still have any sort of issues, I'll post a guide in terms of troubleshooting the R Studio program. So when you launch the R program, this is the common terminal that will come up. So at the top, you have the file, edit, code, view, etc. You have a console that gives you any sort of information. Then you have a terminal. And on the right hand side, you have different files, and you could also import information as well. So you have three different panes that the R Studio delivers for you. So what we want to do, we want to create our first program, right? So let's go to File, New, and you're going to select the R Markdown option. So what the R Markdown option has, it has four different options. So you can document, presentation, Shiny, or from template. We're going with document, and the output format that we're going to utilize is HTML as opposed to PDF or Word. Generally, the HTML is easier because the HTML gives you a nice document. The PDF is a little bit harder to work with because you need to actually install some additional programs. And Word is also good, but you also have to install some additional things. So if we enter title, let's call it my first fun program, and you enter your name in the author field, enter my name, and click on OK. What this does is create a new template document for us. So if you look at the way the document is set up or the layout, at the top you have the title information, things like the author, the date, the output format, which is HTML. You also have the actual code. So this is the programming side of things. This is where the code, you have to actually enter information. And lastly, you have this little area here that you could put additional text information. So in any sort of R Markdown or any sort of programming language, you basically have the ability to enter information or create your individual code. So let's sort of run this code. So what run does is actually runs the code for you. And you have several different options. So you can run all. You could just run a selection of the code. You can also run a separate chunk. So this is a chunk here. You see this area in a slight gray. Those are individual chunks, and this is an individual chunks. So a chunk is just a sort of a breakdown of what the code is, a breakdown of the actual code itself, right? So many chunks make up the entire code. So if we just run this template, what we will get, so just run in all. So what it'll get for you is it'll output some information. So here is a summary set of information for cars. So it looks at the speed for the individual car, what is the minimum speed. So there's actually a car that runs at 4 miles per hour. what the maximum value is, 25 miles, which is pretty good. And then it also, what the next stage is, it asks to actually plot a graph showing the temperature versus the pressure information. So this is the way you actually run your code. Now, if there's an error in your code, so let's say, for example, in summary, I misspelled summary for some reason. Yeah, I just put summer instead of summary. And when you click on the run button here, it gives you a red error, basically saying that there's an error, could not find the function. So this is very important, especially when you're debugging your code, to actually figure out where you've went wrong in the code. All right. So for our first exercise, what we are going to do, we are going to look at have students enter their name and display their name. So let's say, for example, we want to print. So that's the name of the command. So you're going to type in print and your name. And your name needs to be in quotes, right? So Randall Anthony. All right, let's click here and print, right? And see what the system does. It outputs the name for you. What you can do as well is to basically neaten up the code. So you can say at the top here, this is my first and last name. And you could also put down the question number here. So the reason why this syntax here looks blue is because the information here is a little, it'll be bold when you output it, right? So we could just say question, for example 1. One, and this is first and last name, right? So let's just run this code. So at the top here, if you're not within a chunk, you can enter any sort of information. It doesn't have to be the standard set of code. So let's run this here and see the outputs Randall Anthony, right? So let's go to the second chunk, right, which will be example 2. And what we're going to do in example 2 is we are going to the second part, which is create a procedure to add and multiply some variables, right? So we're going to do an operation to add and multiply some variables. Right. So what's a variable? So a variable is basically a storage space, right? So a variable, you can create a variable in your code by saying, so let's create a normal variable. So a, and let's take a number, 8, right? So a is equal to 8. That is a variable. So the variable is 8, or a. And let's say, for example, we have another variable, which is b, and we could just enter some value there, which is 10, right? So let's say, for example, we want to run this code, right? Alright, so it has a syntax error here, so let's just put global. Okay, so basically we need to have the space, right? So for a and b, let's say, for example, we want to take these two variables and we want to add them together. So a plus b, so let's say that is equal to another variable called c, right? And at the end, now if you notice here, when we assign the variable, we didn't actually print out anything. So what we need to do to print out the information is basically say print c. Alright, so let's click on that, and you see the value comes up. So 18 comes up, which is the variable a plus b. Right? So let's say, for example, we want to multiply these numbers together, right? So let's say, for example, D, we're calling that D is equal to A, and we say multiply by B, right? And what we need to do, we also need to print out what D is. So we're going to print D. And we're going to run that. So what it does, it gives us the value for the first output, which is C, and then gives you a value for the second output, which is D. It's always a good habit to make sure that you understand how the output looks. So it's important to say, maybe add in some information here. So for example, you could say this is the variable. Right, and what I want to do, I just want to run a selected line. Right, this is the variable. I need to run all of them. Piece. There's a special command if you want to concatenate a variable with some text, right? So we won't go through that today, but I guess the simplest thing for us to do here is say print. So let's print at the top. This is C, and then below, what we're going to do is print. This is D. Right, I'm going to run the entire chunk, and what it gives us is a nice output. So this is C, this is the variable C, and this is the output D. So let's try some other operations, right? So on your own, what you'll be doing is trying some different operations. So instead of A plus B, you could try A minus B. For D, you could also try different sort of variables, A divided by B, right? The thing to keep in mind is that if you're trying to divide by 0, of course, you're going to get an error. So let's say, for example, B is equal to A divided by 0. All right, let's just run this selected line. Let's see what it gives. All right, so it gives no value, probably because it's an infinite path. All right.